no wonder I have nightmares, because I keep on waking up in the middle of the night thinking, bloody hell, what happens if those two turn up this morning? And sure enough, it's happened. Here they are. It's Richard and Phil, the two Bs in person, here to terrorize me.
Thank you, Keith. It's lovely to see you. And I would like to say, Philip, how nice it is to see you. I'd like to say it, but it wouldn't be the lie that it is. The only advantage being, of course, that you're down a link, so I don't actually have to share your company directly. But there we go.
Well, we both prefer it that way, don't we?
Very much so. Very much so. We have an internet relationship. And talking of which, as you may know, Keith and I had a little chat earlier in the week about.
Yes, I watched some of it. Although I have to say I could barely hear you, which is a shame.
That's all for the best. All for the best. I think you do need those ears waxing, frankly.
Well, I mean, for example, now I hear you perfectly because you're there and you're not using that silly microphone of yours. But there we are.
Thank you, Philip. It's extremely kind. You should hear me doing karaoke with it. But
mind boggles.
Before we start our main topic, it's interesting developments. It's a moving landscape in terms of that case. And we're now told that the Met Police say there are no criminal charges. There's nothing to see here. Off you go. So, in fact, you and I, Phil, have no role in this. But if you don't mind, I just wanted to ask Keith his take on it all.
Please do.
As a journalist.
Yeah. I think it's getting curiouser and curiouser. I can't understand why such a fuss in the first place if there's no case to answer. And if that's the case, then there was nothing to get excited about. As I understand it, this whole thing started with a complaint by the mother of this youngster who's a drug addict. And one wonders whether, in fact, it was some opportunism, and that, if you recall, we went through the same thing with the one of the people that I did know was Field Marshal Lord Bramall,
yes,
who was hounded all on the basis of false information, false charges. So it is going through my mind is that some of this is to do with fantasy. And really, there's nothing of substance there. On the other hand, there was enough kerfuffle, and people got excited enough that it would seem as if no smoke without fire. Well, so the jury is out, as far as I'm concerned.
No, and presumably it would be possible, for example, to obtain telephone data, which may or may not assist in saying where the truth lies.
Yes, could be.
I strongly get the feeling, though, that we will not see him presenting the news ever again.
I doubt it. If in fact his wife is telling the truth, and there's no reason to think that she's not, that he is mentally ill, this business is no place for him. And now that you've got a taste of it, the two of you, I think you would agree. It is not without stress. And it's interesting, it's 20 or 30 years ago now when I was busy reading the news in Northern Ireland, they did some surveys and they put some of these things on newsreaders' arms and so on. And the adrenaline and the tension builds just before you go on the air. So even though you don't recognize it, it's there inside you. And if anybody is terribly fragile, like me, for instance, I mean, I shouldn't be let on the air.
sorry, I get it. Yeah,
but I think that it's better left off.
Yeah.
Well, my observations on it are: firstly, Keith, I agree with you. You epitomise fragility. That's obvious.
Absolutely.
Secondly, there is no doubt that on the bare facts alleged, that the Sexual Offences Act of 2003 would accommodate the criminality of such conduct. But the police say what they say. And the third thing is, sorry, Richard.
I just said under 18, of course.
Yes. Yes.
That would be that's the trigger for that. Yeah. Sorry. You got your third
No, don't
point.
say sorry. Maybe I thought this began when the individual was 17, but maybe I've misunderstood.
Absolutely. So, no. You're absolutely right. So if these events occurred before somebody was 18, they would in fact be criminal offences. But you and I know, Phil, that if there is somebody who's been identified as a potential complainant in such an offence, but is unwilling to assist a prosecution, they can be virtually impossible to pursue.
Yes, I wasn't banging a drum to say there should be a prosecution, and your observation is correct. Excuse me. As Keith has reminded us, the complaint did not come from the alleged complainant. The complaint came from her, assuming it is a female, her mother, because this poor kid is now a crack addict.
It's a male. So I'm glad you read the news.
All right, well, and the mental health issues, again, I'm with Keith. I mean, depression, long-term depression is a terrible thing.
It's wicked.
And I know a bit about it myself, that's all I'll say. And as far as the adrenaline and the stress is concerned, my analogy to that is how I felt whenever I did a case. And I would stress about how I was going to question a witness. I would stress about what I was going to say in my closing speech and so on. So it's an analogy, nothing more. But yeah, when you're on your feet or you're reading that auto cue even, you get that adrenaline rush. And that's what keeps you going. Anyway, there we are.
Phil, might I just share this with you, which is another point that people might benefit from hearing about our profession, which is this, that yesterday I finished a trial out of county.
Yeah.
Earlier than I thought it would happen because we closed the case down into agreed facts and things like that. And so today, and this isn't in any way blowing any trumpet of mine or anything like that, but it's just a reflection of the criminal justice system, is that I've got 4 very short hearings today that our clerks have asked me to do, and I've said yes. Now, you know that those short hearings, and play a small violin when I say this, but you know that in fact they don't particularly pay well. You know, it's trials.
They don't. They don't. It's only if you have a bag full that it's worth it financially.
But 2 things arise. Firstly, and I'm going to walk over the road in due course and do the first of them. The judge will expect you, the barrister, to be completely on top of the case. So even though you're just doing a tiny hearing, they will want you to be able to help them with everything. So you need to read it all, even though, you know, these are 4 cases that I will never prosecute the trials on. I've got my own stuff to be doing long term. But secondly, and I was thinking about you, Phil, last night, and I was screaming in the middle of no. But you know because it's what's happened is because, you know, nowadays everything's electronic, so we get our cases through on the computer. I got these 4 cases through just after 6 o'clock. So at 6:15 p.m., when I'm trying to rustle up some food for my children, my adult children, I should say, who should be able to cook their own bloody food. I know also that I've got this in nagging away in the background. And you'll recognise, I'm sure, that what we do and what I did is that I skim read them all last night. I was looking for the minefield. I was looking for the pothole in the middle of the road, the thing that might create a problem with the case. There weren't any, and so I felt able to say, right, I'm literally going to put these to bed. I'm going to go to bed. And then I got up at 5 o'clock this morning and I read them properly. And that's what barristers do. And people sometimes say, oh, you 10 till 4:30. What an easy life you lead. Oh no.
The out of hours work is far more time consuming and more intense often than what you do in court. The court hearing and the 4 you're doing today, I can only imagine, are the tips of the iceberg.
Well, it's odd. I've got sex and drugs, and I'm afraid to say none of the cases involve rock and roll.
Well, that's the diet. Very few cases involve rock and roll. The frustrating thing I used to find with such things was not the financial side of it. If you had to do it to help your chambers and retain a case in chambers,
you do,
and not let an outsider at it. The frustrating thing I found was that nobody ever told me what the hearing was about. And
Philip, you have to remember what I told you many years ago, which is you needed to learn to read.
Richard,
do you remember On the Move with Bob Hoskins? It's the way he made his breakthrough.
I don't remember that. Bob Hoskins, I've only seen in 3 films. That ludicrous animation with a rabbit or something. The Long Good Friday, in which he was superb.
Yes.
And he played a cameo role as Khrushchev in the film Enemy at the Gates, which is about the Russians retaining Stalingrad and finding a sniper who became a national hero.
Well, I'd be interested to know if any of Keith's One Man and His Dog audience remember On the Move, because it was a program specifically aimed at people who were illiterate and trying to encourage them to go and learn. And Bob Hoskins played, there were sort of 15-minute programs, but he played somebody who couldn't read. And it was the first thing, I'm sure it was the first thing he ever did. It was certainly the first thing I ever saw him in.
Well, if these programs were aimed at the illiterate, that explains why you watched them and I didn't.
Well, the difficulty was that they were only ever advertised in the Radio Times, and so nobody knew that they were on. One Man and His Dog. Okay, before we get on to our main topic, I'm going to ask Keith. I'm going to ask you. The original One Man and His Dog, when we were younger. Who were the 2 presenters?
No idea. None whatsoever.
I have a go at Jack Hawkins. Not Jack Hawkins. He used to do How.
Yeah, it's not him.
No. Well, Hargreaves is who I'm thinking of. Jack Hargreaves, sorry.
You're thinking of Jack Hargreaves, that bearded chap, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
looks rather like you now.
Yeah, very much so. I tell you what, Keith.
Yes.
I will provide a modest prize of chocolate to your first viewer who, without using the internet, comes up with the names of the two presenters. I'm a kind individual that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, Phil, what is it sorry, I've been rambling away like a rambler. What is it you want to talk about today?
You know the song, I'm a Rambler from Manchester way. Do you know that one?
Very well. If I may say so, Phil. A very fine baritone there, didn't you think?
Was he singing?
Oh, I thought it was very, very tuneful.
Okay, right. Well, Keith has a tin ear, but that's okay.
Well, the best lyrics in it is, I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I'm always a free man on Sunday. And it was based on the walk-on protest in the Peak District in the 1930s, when the protesters all climbed Kinder Scout.
Yeah.
In the shadow of which I was brought up for many years of my life, but there we are. The main subject...
That cave does actually have a blue plaque on it now saying Philip Meredith was brought up here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. It was a very... It was a very comfortable cave.
Yeah.
And you can still... You can still see the drawings on the wall I did.
Yeah, and it had running water down those very same walls.
Yes.
So that was handy. Yeah. Anyway, tell us about your main topic today, Philip, before I...
Yes, I mean, I know, and you must take the majority of the broadcast on this because you have far more experience case-wise than I do on this subject. I've only done one case defending where a paedophile, and I have no truck with any of them, but a paedophile was entrapped, which is not a defense in British law. It is in American law, but not here. But he was entrapped by a bunch of vigilantes who take it upon themselves to set up a fake internet link to a fictional youngster of either gender, and bit by bit lure the paedophile in to who can't resist what's on offer because he's a paedophile, and gets deeper and deeper into this mire. And in the case I did, ended up attending what he thought was an encounter with a willing youngster, but in fact was literally set upon by 5 vigilantes, a group of people on the CCTV that would have needed no makeup to have been part of the Star Wars bar. And in a nutshell, they assaulted him, they abused him verbally, they falsely imprisoned him in his own car, they delayed calling the police so they could have their pound of flesh. It reduced him to a gibbering wreck, at which they started chanting crocodile tears, pedo. And by the time the police arrived, he was just a total wreck. And the police were able to do very little other than arrest him on suspicion. And then these people handed over literally a file that they prepare, based on everything that's happened with relation to this individual, they hand it over to the police and say, there you are, we've caught you a pedo. Of course, he pleaded guilty. The police are between a rock and a hard place because, yes, they have an offender. Yes, they have evidence. I'm not so sure they approve of the methods used, but that's a matter for them. The CCTV was played before the sentencing judge. I had made remarks and put remarks on the digital case file, how appalled I was at the vigilante treatment and querying whether that of itself was criminal offending. The sentencing judge gave him credit. He regarded it as strong mitigation as to how he'd been treated by these people, and made comments to the effect that he, the judge, having watched the material, believed that they had committed criminal offences. He went no further than that. And it begs the question, the whole question of vigilantism, is it taking the law into their own hands? Until the point of police involvement, yes, I believe it is. Is it criminal offending? In that instance, that case, I believe they did commit a number of offences with no defence. And B, what is the point if the judiciary in the end reduced the paedophile sentence because of the way they treated him? So they're the issues I've raised with you, Richard. Over to you.
Thank you. If I may say, take the law into your own hands was my favourite chat-up line before I got married. But that's another matter. In relation to this, there are two very emotive words there, which cause strong reactions from people. Paedophile. And no one's going to say paedophiles are all right.
No,
it's okay.
Other than paedophiles themselves.
Yeah, completely. And so we're not saying that, but it begs a question. It's an interesting question in a way, because you and I have had experience of lots of people who have paedophiliac tendencies. That on one level, firstly, I have no doubt, many more people who have those tendencies who don't act upon them, who simply have those fantasies. I have no problem with those people because they don't, in fact, commit any offences. But it raises the question of how you end up with that predilection. And there isn't an easy answer to that. It's like any, I want to use the term fetish, but any view that you have about.
Well, just pausing you there, if I may.
Yeah.
You say end up with a predilection. These people generally are born with this. It's no different to. It's a form of sexuality.
Yes, and I think you and I and lot will know this, but lots of members of the public will assume that in some way people sign up to be a paedophile.
No, they don't.
No, and they can lead very bad criminal lives, but some of them can also lead very unhappy lives because they're aware that they have this wish, but they don't act upon it. And so the word paedophile is a difficult word because people.
Well, it means lover of children.
Yeah, yeah, but people react to it, and say automatically, "Oh, he's a paedophile." And yeah, there are cases like that. We deal with cases like that. There are other people for whom their lives are ruined, and not just by paedophilia. There's a whole range of ways in which people can wish to express their sexual preferences, which is a very intimate and important part of an adult human's life. Some of which are socially acceptable and some of which aren't. And, you meet these people, and as you will well know, Philip, they don't come out of central casting. They don't all look like Keith, paedophiles, even though that you might think they'd all look like Keith.
Well, they don't all look like Keith, no, but some of them like wearing hats, of course.
Oh yes,
Oh, dear.
You can leave your hat.
And it's the hat wearers that are the real problem ones.
It depends whether they're wearing the hat at the time, Philip.
Yes, you can keep your hat on.
Yeah, exactly. Secondly, the word vigilante, because that has sort of connotations of a Wild West posse.
Well, if you'd have seen this CCTV, in my case, you would have expected them to be wearing Stetsons.
No.
It was a posse. It was a posse.
I have both prosecuted and defended these cases, and
I know you have. That's why I want you to carry on.
I am very conflicted about the issue of whether or not this should be permitted. You did say that there's nothing stopping somebody being entrapped in that way. There is, in fact, obviously, as you know, the law concerning what's called agents provocateurs.
Yes.
And it may well be, Phil, that you could just explain to us, because I know that you're completely fluid in French.
Yes, agent provocateur is, somebody who encourages others to commit criminal offences. That person could be an undercover cop in a drug ring. It could be people on the internet enticing paedophiles to commit offences. But agent provocateur is nothing more than mitigation, as I understand it. It doesn't render things
I think in some circumstances it can be, in particular if it's the authority that's doing it. There's a case that I remember, an authority, nothing that I was involved in directly, years ago, where the police were concerned about thefts in an area. And they got themselves a big van with stuff in the back of it, opened the back doors and left the van there.
Yes.
And so all these scallies were coming and taking stuff and getting nicked as they took the stuff. And the court said, hold it, you're setting these people up, aren't you? But just on the vigilante point, before we come on and talk about the vigilante groups itself, Philip, you will be aware that there are police units, albeit they're under-resourced and they have insufficient numbers, which may be a reason why the vigilantes justify what they do, who do something very similar. So you'll have a police officer who creates a false profile on the internet, making out to be typically a child, and puts it out there, and then they get contact. But the officers who do that are very heavily regulated about what they're able to say.
That is precisely the point. That is exactly the point. That is the distinction. I have no problem whatsoever with properly regulated police officers doing that.
Yeah.
I have a huge problem with the circumstances I've described.
No. I did a case down in Portsmouth. I think you might have been involved with it, Philip, about a chap who got caught by the police in that way. I'm wrong.
I've done cases where it's been done that way.
Yeah,
I can't personally recollect whether I did one with you.
No, not with me. But I think
because doing stuff with you is not something I want to remember, really.
Of course, you know, the therapy is working. That's good. But
if you say so.
I had to call this officer, who was the officer, and he was the one who'd set up the false account. And this defendant had gone along to the local McDonald's thinking he was going to meet a 15-year-old girl. And he was sitting there waiting. And then this big bloke in a suit came up to him and said, are you? And he said, yeah. He said,
now, those facts are ringing a bell. Yeah. I think I was involved in such a case, yeah.
I think you were. And but I had so I called the officer who was the computer operative who had created the account and had the conversations pursuant to all those very deep regulations and guidelines as to what they were allowed to say, not inciting in any way, not doing anything, just letting the potential defendant say what they wanted to say. But this bloke, and he was a great copper, I have to say this, he also did face-to-face contact with potential paedophiles. Now, you know, people who do that, so there are officers who do it with drugs, I know. We're okay for time, aren't we, Keith?
You're okay for time, yeah.
And he did it in relation to paedophiles, so he'd go and meet people. And he did look like an archetypal paedophile.
Yeah.
And when he got into the witness box, and he was screened from the defence because otherwise his cover is blown. You know, he can't never do that particular way. And actually, the first thing he said, I didn't expect it. He said to the jury, all credit to him. He said, members of the jury, I don't choose to look like this. And he had sort of lank hair and a And he said, I don't choose to look like this, but in fact, it assists with the work that I do when I actually have to come into contact with other people, because they, you know, nobody would think that I was a police officer. And he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that particular defendant went to prison for a bit of time, as I recall. As was the right verdict, but you're right, Phil. Your experience of the vigilante cases is that judges don't like them. I had one just over the road here a few years ago where I was defending, and a judge, now long retired, gave a very light sentence. And it was taken to the Court of Appeal and duly lenient sentence provision. So in other words, the prosecution appealing the length of the sentence. And the Court of Appeal said, no, it's not that. You know, come on, you know, this is almost setting somebody up. And you're also absolutely right, Phil, about a number of things. Firstly, that they can be very abusive And people might want to do whatever they want to do to paedophiles, but leave it to the law enforcement agencies to deal with that. Secondly, and increasingly, they live stream the encounter. So they have a web page and they say, we're now going to meet with the bloke outside Hove railway station, for example. And they're all videoing it on the phones, and it's going straight to a live stream out there, which I find troubling personally. And the third thing I suppose is this, is that if they have identified somebody as seeking to have an encounter, and let's just be clear about the law on that. It isn't to groom a child in the sense of being in contact with them with a view to meeting them and then trying to meet them. That in itself is an offence, even if nothing sexual in fact occurs.
Okay, yeah.
But if they've got to that stage where they've got hard evidence by way of email exchanges or whatever it might be, social media exchanges, that shows that somebody has these tendencies and wants to have a meeting, what they could do, and frankly in my view ought to do, is to phone up the police and say, and it's almost invariably men, this fella's going to be at this place at this time. This is the evidence that we have. They don't. And part of the reason they don't is that I think they want, it's something about their own personal proving themselves to be heroes.
That's exactly right. It's all about their own egos.
Yeah, so I'm in no way deprecating what they're seeking ultimately to achieve, which is that pedophiles don't in fact meet out with kids. It's their methods that I find difficult.
Yes, I mean, let's assume that anybody who will view this debate on Mirador, they have no problem with private people using technology to entrap a genuine paedophile. Let's assume they have no problem with that at all.
Yep.
But stage two is when they, not the police, turn up, mob-handed in my example. They should have already rung the police.
Yep.
To tell the police, we have this evidence, we will be at this location, we know this man's vehicle, we will surround the vehicle, we will say nothing, we will inform him that the police are on the way, and we will do nothing else. And in theory, the police arrive within minutes, and he's handed over with the file.
Yeah, that's exactly. That may be very much. I strongly agree with your sentiments. People might criticise us for that, the lawyer's answer. But the difficulty is exactly what you described in the case that you had, where it goes beyond what is reasonable conduct, because it doesn't, go over the road, go and see the way the dock staff deal with people who are the most horrendous offenders, but they ensure that those offenders retain their dignity insofar as they can, and they don't abuse them, because that on behalf of the state is a very difficult, slippery slope. And
Well, on that subject, all the years I spent in the Sussex courts, including the magistrates' court, I have nothing but admiration and respect for the custody staff.
oh, completely. They're beautifully calm, and therefore are able to dissipate potential conflict. They do treat those who are detained with appropriate dignity. They don't. It's not an easy life that people who are at HMP Lewis have. So it's not that they get treated especially differently. It's what you would expect from a reasonable and humanitarian state, and they achieve that. And I'm glad to be able to work alongside them. Both.
Well, just returning, given that we've now gone on for over 40 minutes, just returning to the main subject.
Yeah.
Am I right to sum it up in this way? You are conflicted personally with the idea of vigilantes doing what they do and enticing paedophiles into the web. But you would never, struggling for words here, you would never entirely condemn it.
I can understand why they do it, and part of the reason they do it is that the police are massively under-resourced, and so the police simply can't deal with the number of people out there who are doing deeply unattractive things.
But in a perfect world, the ideal, would it not, would be regulated officers of the law, whether they're agents provocateurs or whatever, regulated officers of the law doing that, and with that, neither of us have a problem. Would that be correct?
Absolutely right. And all those officers will have been trained, and they will be conversant with the codes of practice under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which is what regulates their conduct towards people whom they detain. I do have concerns that at some stage there will be a vigilante event that will end up with very serious injury, to say the least.
Yes, well, quite so. Quite so. I mean, at least my example, they kept him in the car. At least there's that. They didn't drag him out and do something worse. But there we are. Well, I hope, Keith, that's been of interest to you and your viewers.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the way that I love to start the day, of course. And the thing is that the news is just so dreadful and so rubbishy that I'm quite happy to delay it for half an hour. And we're actually just coming up to 9 o'clock. So it is fitted in extremely well. The only thing that really worries is in that little gap that we have between 9 and 9:30 is that after you two, I have to go and take some calming and soothing medicine before I can carry on with the rest of the day.
No, we are very stressful. I agree.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, sometimes I have hair when I start this program.
Not that I've seen. If you have any hair, you hide it with a hat.
Well, I'm keeping it hidden. Perhaps there's somebody out there taking bets on it.
Well, I will bid you farewell.
All right. What are you doing for the rest of the day?
Other than taking my wife to a railway station, she's going up to London today because our youngest son, who is a musician, is playing the double bass in a jazz festival at the Guildhall Conservatoire, where he's a student.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So she's going up there to, as she always does, to support him, and she's going with our daughter, our oldest child, adult child. So that should be nice.
Yes, indeed. Well, now,
so as you can sense, I live a very exciting life these days.
Well, as you've got a very sort of dull day in front of you, let me spice it up by asking you to mull over how you and Richard might do what I call a special, and that it's absolutely nothing to do with law or being barristers or whatever. I mean, if you decided that you wanted to sing campfire songs, fine. But I'd love to see a half-hour program with the two of you doing absolutely nothing to do with legal matters.
Right. Well, I'm game for anything like that.
I'll bring the fire and you bring the camp, Phil.
Anyway, that is your charge for the day, to from time to time mull over what the two of you might do.
Very well, Mr. Hayes. I shall now disappear and wish you both well.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for joining us. And yes, a good start to the day. And he's gone already. Zip. Yes, Richard, a very interesting hour. I mean, I think that the format that you've got, where you mix some principle of law in with your personal cases, is a nice way of illustrating what the hell goes on.
It can be a very dull topic, I have to say. So.
Well, I don't think it is when you two are around.
Well, no, Phil's quite good at that. Now, do you want to borrow my wig and go over the road and do my cases for me?
Yeah, indeed, I would. It would be a new experience for me.
Absolutely.
But am I defending or am I prosecuting?
Oh, you're prosecuting all day, so it's not a problem.
Oh, well, we can shovel a few into the jug.
You just say guilty.
Right.
Guilty.
Absolutely. Yes,
right. So that's not a problem. Keith, I'm going to slope away if that's okay.
Absolutely. I'm going to give us a little break now. So if you'll sit there for 2 seconds or so, just to make it tidy. And I will be back in about 5 minutes or so when we'll do our news review before Liza Page comes in to get everybody's blood going again. What a day we've got. And I have to say that our programs are becoming fuller and fuller and more interesting, and that is it is being reflected in the figures. And one of the areas that we are doing quite well, which we never did well before, is LinkedIn, which is the tends to be the professional website, and so we are striking a chord with those people. But always very good to see you, and I shall sit here and gaze at the courthouse and think, oh my God, he's up there in front of the judge, tucking a few people into the jug.
That's the one, and I'll see you at some point next week, Keith. Depending on, I've got a little trial starting locally, and we'll just see how that goes.
All right, that's great. I hope that let's see, it's Thursday, isn't it? I hope that we get you and Phil back on Monday. I'm sorry to push you and make you work so hard, but that's television, my dear chap. That's television.
Oh, to be famous like you are, Keith.
We are going to be back in 5 to 10 minutes. So wish Richard well in his court appearances today. And I'll be back so that you can see whether I need wishing well. So for the moment, toodle-pip.